The European elections matter because Europe matters, and when you look at all of the problems that are besetting the world now and are going to beset it even more in the future, they're all problems that can't be solved by nations acting on their own. That's true whether you're talking about climate change, obviously one of the most pressing, but also whether you're talking about things like organised crime or people trafficking or the spread of pathogens. All of those problems that are increasingly facing us and threatening our security and our prosperity are all problems that, if we really want to solve them, require us to pool sovereignty. And that's why Europe is such an important factor in all of our futures. And frankly, if Europe is going to be that important in our future, then it's really important that we have democratic control over Europe, and that's why the elections are so important. Well, two things I think would be really important. First of all, Britain would have effectively surrendered its sovereignty over the climate. Britain can't manage the climate on its own. It can only manage the climate if it can persuade others to do that. And so we would find that our ability to get the rest of the world to leave us with a climate in which we could carry on being British would be much reduced, because there'd be one nation arguing instead of 28. So simply a question of numbers in getting others to do things. But also, in a much more immediate sort of sense, Europe is where we send our exports to, and which our economy depends on. And frankly, if we leave Europe, then our prosperity will be enormously damaged. So both our prosperity and our security are put at risk by leaving the European Union. Governments are always inclined to blame somebody else for their failures, and we see a lot of that in the way governments, not just the British government, criticise Europe for causing problems, getting in the way, being obstructionist. Actually, that's largely because Europe quite often is the most significant force of making governments keep their word. There's no doubt in my mind at all that if we hadn't been signed up to the Europe 2020 agreement on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, developing renewable energy sources and improving energy efficiency, that the British government would have backslid a lot more. It's already backslid a bit, or would certainly have backslid a lot more than it's done, because it's now bound up in European law. So it makes it much harder for governments to fail to deliver on the promises they make if we're inside the European Union, and those promises are promises made by Europe as a whole, than it would be if the British government is on its own. As we've seen over the last couple of years, the government has a tremendous habit of changing its mind as the headlines change. I think what really matters in these coming elections is that people vote, and in a sense who you vote for is less important than that you vote and get out and vote. And that's particularly true for young people who, in a way, are most likely not to bother to vote. But actually, this really matters for the future. And if you think our future is in Europe, and I think you'd be very unwise if you didn't think our future was in Europe, then you've got to get out there and vote. And in a way, because attendance is so low, voting is so low generally, it gives disproportionate power to younger voters if they decide to come out and vote. And my advice to them will be to come out and vote, and actually vote Green. Otherwise, you're leaving the kind of protest vote open to the people who want to destroy the European Union in the various right-wing populist parties around Europe. Basically, get out and vote Green if you're young, because that's really one of the most important signals you could get to politicians about what you think is important in the future.